This video is a record of a couple of sessions in front of the iconic Timeball Tower in Deal. This stretch of beach is the area south of the pier where the Prince of Wales Terrace merges into Beach Street. I first had a go here in November after watching part of the British Open fished along the marina. This was only going to be a couple of hours recce since I've only got some leftover ragworm and some squid to use up. The best of the tide has already gone since I've started about 2 hours down. Whilst my long wire boom rig is already out there, I'm baiting up a 3-hook short snood clip down rig. I've attached a star lead to this rig since the tidal pull has already slowed down a bit. The other rig has got a breakaway lead with wires to keep it in place a bit more. Although I've not had a bite on a boom rig yet, I'm going to bring it in to check the baits. If I'm going to catch any flatfish, it's this rig that's most likely to do the business. While I change the baits, we'll have a quick pan round the area. The pier is very close by and I can just about make out a few people fishing from it. Coming into view is the old Regent Cinema and a Timeball Tower covered in scaffolding, then the buildings of the Prince of Wales Terrace. I've set my gear up and be fishing from the top of Shingle Beach, which has got a fairly steep drop off. The other 2 rigs I've already mentioned and have baited up. I've also got a loop rig set up with bigger baits which I alternate with the other 2 rigs. I have fished a pier before and I've seen people catch codling along this stretch, but I haven't fished this stretch of beach myself. The tide is still pulling from my right to my left, so I've cast out the clip down rig first. Casting the boom rig some distance updrift. As I place my rod down and await my first bite, I run through locational details. The map first shows the position of Deal in relation to the other parts of Kent. Many would be familiar with venues on the north coast and those on the south, west of Dover. Kingsdown and Sandwich Bay are also popular areas, and I'll quickly identify some of the marks between the 2. They all have good access and can produce on their day. I've not fished them all, but I'm gradually working my way through them. Sandown Castle is at the northern end of Deal and is adjacent to the Sandwich Bay stretch. Homing in on Deal itself, I'll point out where the Prince of Wales stretch is in relation to the other marks. Walmer merges with Deal, and a bit on fishing is between Deal Castle and the pier. There's metered parking along Beach Street and restricted parking down the side roads, but these restrictions don't apply on a Sunday, so that's probably the best time to come here. Anywhere along this bit is worth fishing, but there are some snags in places. This map shows the precise spot I fished, which certainly isn't snag free. It's pretty quiet now compared with the action you can expect at the top of the tide, and it's in stark contrast to what I saw at that time in the British Open. I then get my first knock, which is quite a decent one. I strike into it and I'm sure I've got something on. It's only a pouting, but it's better than nothing. I'm disappointed not to have a bite on a boom rig, so it's time to swap that over to the loop rig. Just checking to make sure the tidal pull is still in the same direction. I'll get a good bite on the clip down rig and feel a decent fish on. Unfortunately, the fish came off, so I didn't find out what it was. The fish may have been foul hooked, since the baits don't look like they've been touched. Now for a good bite on a loop rig. Once again, it feels like there's a decent fish on, but I think it might have snagged me. Definitely snagged, but I can feel something thumping. I let some line out in the hope the fish might be able to swim out. Unfortunately, it still goes solid. I feel I'm gaining a little bit, but not enough to move it. My only hope now is to try from a different angle. Unfortunately, try as I might, I couldn't budge it, and eventually had to pull for a break. This is one of 3 decent fish I lost, but I did end up with another consolation pouting. So, not a great cut of hours, but I did enjoy watching the match earlier in the day, and the lost fish gave me the incentive I needed to come back and give it another try. My next visit was in early January, and I started with a 3-hook clip down rig and a boom rig. I'll be fishing the tide right up this time, so I'll transfer over to a loop rig a bit later on. If I'm going to catch a bigger fish, I'm expecting it to be on that. If I was going to go all out for big fish, I would have been fishing a pulley rig or pulley drop down rig. It'd be worth it if I knew they were coming out, but otherwise it'd be limiting my chances of catching other fish. A big bait on the bottom snood of a loop rig and a worm bait on top still gives me a chance of catching other fish. To begin with though, I'm fishing to avoid a blank, so I'm fishing smaller baits on smaller hooks. Having dragged my baits, I then get the first bite for session. Unfortunately, it looks like that bite was missed. Once again, I don't have any lugworm, so I'm baiting up with ragworm. Occasionally that's being tipped with fish baits. Next bite's a bit more positive, and I think I've hit this one. Well, I'm not surprised to find it's a pouting, a bit bigger than the ones in the previous session. With the waves lapping at my gear, it's time to move up the beach. It's nice to see that Timeball Tower behind me is now free of scaffolding. I've now switched one of my rigs over to loop rig, which I'm baiting up. I've put on a bit of bluey and squid on the bottom hook, and that needs to be secured with elastic. One of the larger ragworms is chosen for the top hook. For anyone interested, a link to a video of how I make my loop rigs is in the top right hand corner and in the description for this video. get a couple of little taps which are worth striking. And that produces the first of the whiting. Another bite soon after recasting that 3-hook clip down rig. This feels a bit different. It's not that big, but this dogfish felled for ragworm tip with squid. From my previous experiences, I'm expecting the tide to start pulling quite hard towards the top of the tide, so it's time to find some bigger leads with wires. My rod tip's already pulling round quite a bit in the tide, so the bigger wired leads will help to hold bottom. I'm now picking up some of that annoying weed which gets stuck in the top ring. Weed inevitably gets stuck in a knot of a shock leader. With increasing tow, I'm expecting the action to pick up, but it seems to be a lot quieter than I was expecting. The tips are being pulled right round, but I am spotting the occasional small knock. I spot a bite on my right hand rod, which has now got a short snood Sheppey rig on. Initially, I thought the rig was stuck, but I feel something on. I'm sure it's a flatfish, but before I can bring it in, I need to remove a weed which has got stuck to the leader knot. Much to my surprise and joy, it's not a dab, but a sole. I've not caught one of these in January before. The sole is followed by a decent sized whiting on the loop rig. It's the top of the tide now, and the tide is pulling so hard I've had to weigh down my tripod with a bag of stones. Not too long afterwards, I get a bite and everything locks up. I was a bit surprised that I hadn't found a snag so far, but with the extra tow means extra weed being pulled around, and eventually some of that gets onto your line and drags your rig into the snag. Try as I might, I couldn't budge it, so once again I'm going to have to pull for a break. Although better than the previous one, this session was by no means hectic. I only ended up with 6 fish, but at least it was a mixed catch. I did lose what I thought was a decent fish, so unfortunately, again, none of those came out this time. What made this a memorable session though, is that I did catch my first sole of the year.